And good evening. It is Curtis Selby, retired midnight blogger. One blogs in this case at 8 p.m. I truly am tired tonight. Reference back to the previous stream where I said that the chronic fatigue is real. But I have made it. I am extending my apologies for Thade and wishing him the best. He is having a migraine headache, and I totally get it. I've had those myself. I don't know that I could do this stream with that going on. I'm going to let the music play for just a few seconds as I go get a drink. That's what it records on the stream. Some of you may have heard my overpaid assistant, Cassie, shaking her collar, letting us know that she's here. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the music, and I will very slowly begin. I usually like to drag my feet a little bit because the first 8 minutes I have learned are the minutes when YouTube is most likely to censor or to get upset or to basically make your life miserable. So I like to take 8 minutes to kind of chill, talk a little bit. That way there's not much opportunity for F-bombs to be thrown out, and the things that I share are less likely to have any kind of weird claim against them, whether copyright or otherwise. I don't believe anything that I'm going to share is copyrighted today. My apologies if any of it is. But today's topic is going to be the return of the king. I'm painfully tempted to sing the song from the Rankin Bass, Return of the King, but I will not do so because, again, YouTube doesn't like people to do stuff that's copyrighted. I'm moderately sure that that song is copyrighted. But I'm going to start with, why is it that so much fantasy impacts us so powerfully, and so much of it has to do with either the setting up of a rightful king or the deposing of an evil usurper tyrant and then replaced with a righteous king? You see it in the Return of the King itself. I mean, that's what a third of that whole series is about. Yes, we're destroying the ring. We're making sure that the tyrant can't rule us, but in order to continue that peace, we establish a king. We enthrone a king. And I love how in the movie, and I think it was in the book too, although it's been way too long since I read the books. It's probably been close to 20 years since I've read the books. But Aragorn kneels to the hobbits because they are the ones that set him on the throne. Well, if you read the Golden Bough, there's all kinds of rituals. There's all kinds of establishments. Basically, the king is not really supposed to be there just for his own aggrandizement. It's not just that he's the great spiffy thing. He is the leader. He's the one that's going to ride in the front in battle. He's the one that's going to have to make the hard decisions and be responsible if those decisions go poorly. The Bog King cultures of Northern Europe, we don't really understand them perfectly, but I know that there are schools of thought that say that those bog sacrifices were kings. They were sacrificed because either they had made mistakes, or maybe through no fault of their own, the land just was not producing, and we're going to give our best to the gods in the hopes that they will return their favor to us. The king is important because he is the one who establishes the laws, he sets the boundaries, he's the one who makes the rules. But it's not that unlike the way it's usually done, whether monarchy or republic, even, all too often the leaders are making the rules just to benefit themselves, and we can all go get stuff. But the idea of the king is these rules are supposed to apply to everybody, often even to himself. This was part of the Arthurian legend. The queen was running around on him with Lancelot, and Arthur wanted to be weak. He wanted to actually let this go and just let his best friend and his wife just go and dishonor him. But these rules had to apply to everybody, and he couldn't spare himself even. He had to administer the justice that was supposed to be done. And of course, in the end, that justice ended up going down the tubes, and Modred rebelled, and Arthur eventually ended up dying, or at least somehow being on the island of Avalon, from which we hope that he will return in Britain's greatest hour of danger. And I can't imagine what that might be, since he didn't come back from World War II. But Matt Cheatwood has made it back, and I haven't thanked you for being in the chat. Thank you very much for being here so far. To my knowledge, I believe you're the only one that is here. Um, I did not mean to do that. So I was trying to check on the YouTube playing thing and see if there's anyone else. And yes, Matt, I too read a fair amount of these Arthurian legends, and I love nearly all of them. I don't have it. It's not going to work that way. Okay. Hopefully, I'm still. Let me know if you can hear me. I think you can, but I've learned the hard way that I can push the wrong buttons. Okay. And hello, Lady of the Elements. Um, There's someone there with great queenly energy. I know that my heart goes out, and my prayers and thoughts are going out to Thade. He has a migraine today and won't be joining me, but he is welcome to if he comes out of it anytime before I finish. I don't know if will make it till 10, but that is my plan. Saying that the content and my energy and the enthusiasm of the crowd permits. I'm very glad. 5 people is actually much more than I used to have, so I'm very happy. And Sashi is always lurking and always welcome. And everyone is saying hello to everybody. And yes, migraines do suck. I have been blessed in some ways. I have not had many migraines, but the few that I have had, I will not poo-poo anyone who has a migraine. They are not fun things. So the topic today is the king, the archetype of the king. The king is the leader. He's the one that makes the rules, but he makes the rules for everybody. He makes them justly and applies them justly. This is the one so many fantasies are built on. And I think it's very salient that a lot of our fantasies, the Return of the King, the Chronicles of Narnia, the Prydain Chronicles, if you've read those, they center in many cases upon they center upon the establishment of a righteous king. He will be lurking. I'm actually probably going to do a cursory thing on the ancient meanings of the kingship. My intent is more to talk about how we've lost the king and also how we need to somehow reestablish the king, but that does not necessarily mean going back to a monarchy. And all right, if I need you, I will holler. And deleted scenes. Hello, thank you very much for being here. I hope that I can make a stream that is worthy of your time. So, as I said, many of the ancient uh, legends just had a king. There was a chief from the very ancient times. You know, there was the father of the tribe, the chief of the tribe, the king of the tribe, and this was the person that was supposed to essentially he set aside his own safety and his own uh, aggrandizement for the good of the tribe, and because of that, the tribe would take care of him. Basically, he would get sometimes the first fruits, sometimes not, but he might get the best or he might get the most. But the essential premise was he gets it because he's putting himself out there in the battle. He's putting himself out there in the administration of justice. He's the one that's going to take care of the bullies. The lead scenes is making dinner and on standby. Oh, he may need you sub for a stream. Well, let me know where you're at, and if I get done in time, I'll send people there. Although, again, my plan is to try to go till 10. Energy and content and viewer participation withstanding. I'm going to start a little bit bass backward. I'm going to talk about how even in a republic, we may not have had kings, but we still had our heroes. And I will not touch the Thai monarch with a 10-foot pole. No, no. As far as the Thai monarch is concerned, he is swell. He is, or they are the wonderful person. I don't even know anything about the Thailand monarch. I should look that up. But we'll not look that up now. Although, for the sake of that cheap wood, I will maybe take a segue and look up ancient meanings of kingships. Sorry to be doing this. Kingship. All right. I will look here into the Sacred Kingship from Britannica. And let's go ahead and present that. Share the screen. Because I think that that's actually a better place to begin than I had been going to. I was going to do it backward, but I think I will begin at the beginning and then maybe put the ending where it belongs, at the ending. So, Britannica talks to us about sacred kingship. You see here a picture of Ramesses II. He has his hand on the foes, and the foes, of course, and the narrative, at any rate, is that these are the bad guys, these are the enemies of civilization, these are the people who are going to come into our homes and kill us and murder us. So we want to be safe, and the king is there to keep us safe. Sacred kingship, religious and political concept by which a ruler is seen as an incarnation, manifestation, mediator, or agent of the sacred or holy, transcendent or supernatural realm. The concept originated in prehistoric times, but it continues to exert a recognizable influence in the modern world. At one time, when religion was totally connected with the whole existence of the individual as well as that of the community, and when kingdoms were in varying degrees connected with religious powers or religious institutions, there could be no kingdom that was not, in some sense, sacral. I'm going to go put one side note in here. To 3 to 5 years per count in Thailand. Well, let us all agree with Sashi, and I hope he takes this the right way. I don't mean this to sound mocking of you or your king or anybody, but God save the king of Thailand. Yes, I do not want to spend 3 years in a Thailand prison, or for Sashi to spend that time there. So, H.G. Wells wrote a history of the world that was very interesting. And he talked about how much of your ancient history can be somewhat oversimplified. Yes, Matchy Wood. It can be somewhat oversimplified into the competition between the kings and the priests. They're always vying for power. Matchy Wood was referring to the pre-Christian types of kings, not hereditary but chosen. They were often viewed as being married to the land. Yes, they were generous with goods and fair in giving justice. Yes, that was the entire point of the pre-Christian kings. Essentially, this king is either a god or a descendant or a mediary of the gods, and this king has been chosen. Sometimes there might be some hereditary notions, but largely not. Something I've learned is that when you look at kings pre 600, it's amazing how rarely you actually saw the eldest son being the next king. It did happen a fair amount of times, but it definitely was not 100%. And it seems to me like it was much less than 50% of the time. And that's somewhat alien to the modern view of kingship, where you have the primogenitor and the eldest son, and then eventually got to where it's the eldest sibling, whether male or female, and that's a very recent thing there. Among the many possible kinds of sacral kingdoms, there is a special type in which the king was regarded and revered as a god, the god kingdom, a polity of which there were three forms: preliminary, primary, and secondary. The preliminary form exists in cultures in which the chieftain is regarded as divine. The primary form was the god king of the large empires of the ancient Middle East and East Asia, of ancient Iran, and of pre-Columbian Mesoamerica and South America. The secondary form occurred in the Persian, Hellenistic, and European empires. Between these three forms, there are many transitional types. The phenomenon of sacral kingship was known and described in ancient times by various travelers, including Aristotle in the 4th century BC. In the 1st century BC, Greek geographers and historians Strabo and Diodorus Siculus. The study of sacred kingship, however, was introduced when the British anthropologist Sir James Frazer published The Golden Bough. I'm afraid I have only read portions of that, but what I have read is a fascinating read. A king in the Germanic civilizations could lose his kingship if he was viewed unfavorable by the people. They would just stop giving him tribute or obeying his commands. I know there's a story when the Normans were becoming powerful. Rollo, when he first became Duke of Normandy, he had to submit to the authority of the King of France. Well, he did so, but he did so in a very Norman/Viking way. He knelt, he touched the foot of the king, and then he proceeded to dump the king on his royal arse, and in so many words, let it be known that, yeah, you're the king in name. Leave my duchy alone. I'm basically the real king there. Yeah, I love that story. So Sir James Frazer, taking his comprehensive material, he concentrated on the preliminary stage. I know he talked a lot about the Druids and how they would have a king that would guard the sacred grove, and Basically, he was king as long as he was able to guard that sacred grove. And then if he was defeated ever, if he was killed, basically, then the next person was the king. And the Druids, of course, they went back for many thousands of years, back before history. So the ancient ideals of kingship, basically that the king is one with the land, that he protects the land, that he heals the land, and that the people's obedience is not necessarily subject to just him existing, but him actually taking care of the people. You're absolutely right, Matt. That's the way kingship was for many thousands of years. With, of course, there were exceptions, and I won't get into those. Dad man walking, rolling through. Just got home, can't stay. But that's okay. I know we'll have an awesome stream. Thanks for coming by. Dad man walking is a busy, busy man. The thing is, I won't go too deep into this, but the king is essentially the father. I'm a little bit oversimplifying it, but that's essentially what gave him authority. Was he's the one protecting, he's teaching, he's guiding, he is mentoring the children, he is being the kind of person that people need him to be. There were supernatural elements that were felt to be in this. That doesn't necessarily mean we have to believe in the supernatural or that any of that was true, but but um, but it was believed. There is essentially a supernatural thing that his good rule provided food, fertility of the women and other fathers in the kingdom, good weather, calm and peaceful communal life, protection against enemies, misfortune. Because the supernatural, I'm reading from Britannica now again, because the supernatural and magical power of the chief is identical with his own life force, the chief or king of such a society is not allowed to have any physical defects. So I would have been right out right there. With the dwindling of his own physical powers, whether it was illness, graying of hair, loss of teeth, his own power to maintain and secure the common welfare, and his own ability to rule are believed in some cases to be correspondingly diminished. This form is found mainly over rulers over one or several tribes. He could be a chief, a medicine man, a shaman, or a king. So then we get into the pharaohs, the semi-divine kings. He's basically considered to be the son of Ra. We had Gilgamesh and the affiliation of the Greek and Roman kings with the gods. So the sacred was very much part of it, but it wasn't like the divine right of kings that we ended up with in the Christian times. So, what does all this have to do with us here in the 20th century? When we don't have kings, we have presidents, we have senators, we have parliamentarians. Britain has a king, but that king has very limited power. Okay, very good. I've established a good definition of kingship. There we go. Thank you very much for letting me know, because sometimes I'm not sure if I have got to the point good enough. But there, according to one of the things I want to deal with before I get too deep into the next topic. I know Troy, and God bless him. I say this with respect, but he showed a commercial. I'm just not going to comment. he had a really great Geico commercial where the drill sergeant Hurley, whatever his name was, the actor, deleted scenes can correct me if I'm wrong on that name. He's basically being a psychotherapist, and his essential therapy for the guy is to suck it up. Sure, yeah, we know all about those conditions. The there is definitely there is, I think, too much psychoanalyzing. There's too much of we're going to be snowflakes and this and that. But there's also, I believe that one has to have a balance in that. I know some of us, yes, thank you, deleted scene, R. Lee Ermey, who was a great, as far as I know, was a great drill sergeant and was definitely a great art actor, at least when it came to playing a drill sergeant. And a drill sergeant is, in a way, a kind of king. But some of us are whole and already have our crap together. I would suggest that Matt Cheatwood is one of those people who has his crap together more than most of us. Sashi, deleted scenes, Dad Man Walking. I'm basically talking to people who mostly have their acts together better than I do, but many of us don't. And from having a good therapist, I've learned that there is a place for some of the psychoanalysis. You can overdo it. Dr. Phil talks about how if you're not careful, it just turns into mental masturbation. But some of us actually do need to try to figure out what the heck went wrong in our psyche and what can we do to fix it. Matt Cheatwood says kingship requires manhood. Not all men are king, but all kings are men first. And that's true. That's true. The book I'm reading right now on the healing of men is Iron John and chemicals overstimulation. Yeah, that's a big part of it. Deleted scenes. Yeah, you actually did talk once about it, and I don't want to get into anything. I don't want to get too deep into it, but I know that you do have some struggles yourself, and I guess what I'm trying to say is some of us have bigger struggles than others, and we all try to respect each other. Watches deleted fall apart every night before bedtime. Well, that is an interesting form of therapy. No, I know, Lady V. I know that was just a joke. I think we all love and respect deleted scenes. If there's anybody in this chat that doesn't, well, please don't let me know, because that might not be a great thing for staying in the chat. But I think everybody in here that I've seen is someone that I love and respect. So one of the branches of psychoanalysis that I have the most respect for, although it is kind of woo-woo, and therefore, I know I have to be a little bit careful with it, but one of my favorite schools is Jungian psychology. And let me present now the next thing. And Carl Jung has 4 archetypes of the mature masculine. And I'm going to just give a very cursory overview because my focus is going to be on the king. But there's actually 4 archetypes. We all have different levels, Lady V says, of having our stuff together. And she's more of a volcano. I have it together till I don't. I am afraid that I am very similar to that. I've gotten better about it, but I'm okay. I'm okay. We're okay. I'm okay with you. We're okay. I am really not okay with you. And it can come out of nowhere. And I'm trying to be better at that. But at letting people know in a respectful fashion before it becomes a big problem. I appear put together because I play Asian in the life RPG, says Sashi. We have to fake it till we make it. I keep faking it. I don't know if I'm ever going to make it. But so the 4 archetypes are the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. A book was published about this in 1990, and that was his name, was King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. Between it and the Robert Bly Iron John, a book about men, you basically have the psychological and poetic side of the men's movement. It's very different from the red pill. Not, I'm not going to discuss the red pill, not because I don't have thoughts about it, and there are frankly people in that space that I respect. Uh, uh, and I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't be laughing at the quotes in the chat, but Matt Cheatwood's asking, what trait do us white folk have? Lady V, the archetypes are fascinating to explore. They really are. Definitely recommend everyone take a psyche look at those, and you learn so much. There, I know that a lot of things in your tarot cards, which I actually don't know as much as Lady V about that, but a lot of things in your tarot cards involve Jungian archetypes. They're much older than Carl Jung. He didn't invent them, he more or less discovered them. So what I wanted to talk about as far as the king, each of the archetypes has kind of a triangular structure. And just like the virtues of Aristotle, the virtue tends to be the mean between 2 extremes. And so, I don't know how well you can see this diagram from this page, but at the base of the archetype, you have the shadow forms. You have the quote unquote bad forms. They are the tyrant and the weakling. Obviously, the king has to be something in between. The king in his fullness is above, beyond, but also encapsulates. He actually embraces the shadows of the tyrant and the weakling. That doesn't mean that he's either of them essentially, but if there is some hard decision that has to be made and it seems tyrannical, well, he has the strength and the wisdom to know when that needs to happen. But then he also has the strength and wisdom to know that, sometimes you have to be soft. Sometimes you actually have to give in to the people or to the circumstances. Sometimes you have to surrender or run and then live to fight another day. Most of this is above my head, things I would probably not make the right decisions on. Yeah, we have the white privilege trait. Yeah, that's respectfully, Sasha. I'm not saying this to call you out, but my white privilege has gotten me jack and squat. Lady Violana, psyche trick to read aloud. 1 sock cutter, he cut socks. 2 sock cutters, they cut socks. 3 sock cutters, they cut socks. 4 sock cutters, they cut socks. I don't know what that even means, but that sounds really cool. Yeah, and you just got me with it, so that's okay. Before a boy can access the king archetype, he has to develop the divine child. The child also has their psychology. And this is something that I've learned the hard way, and there's an art to it that I'm learning, but you have to take care of that inner child without being really fruity or, overwhelming to the people around you, or, there's appropriate ways to do it. But the boyhood archetypes are what evolve into the manhood archetypes. Uh, the precocious child, the Oedipal child, those are the shadow bases. And then the divine child is the epitome of it. Essentially, the one of the deep meanings in Christianity, one of the ways in which it, I tried to defeat it. One of the ways in which Christianity speaks to people, I'm not here to tell you to be Christians. I'm just saying that one of the powers that mythos has, and I hope that everyone understands, when I say mythos, I don't mean that it's correct or incorrect. I just mean to say that it's holy stories. It's sacred stories to somebody. But one of the powers of it is that Christ child, that divine child, he's not precocious and, constantly throwing in your face that he's better than you. He's not Oedipal. He's not trying to overthrow Joseph and Mary. He's divine. He's got all of it together. Now, of course, on some levels, that's completely beyond our capacity to do, but that's the ideals. And then, depending on how closely we get to that ideal, often depends on how closely we get to the correct, the best versions of the archetypes. The king, let's see, I thought he had that here as well. Each archetype has a mature and immature form. Don't know if he's going to show that or not. I think he does, but I can't read this. But essentially, the tyrant, the weakling, those are largely the immature forms of the king. And we see those all through history. You have to be a loving father to yourself, even if you didn't have one. There you go. Matt Cheatwood put it perfectly right there. The daddy issues don't have to be, and it's also one of the few ways to be a true Sigma. Yeah, yeah. And that's like this might be controversial, but I don't see myself as a Sigma, but I see myself wanting to be more like the Sigmas than like the Alphas. But then I think the true Alphas are very much, you know, they're the divine. They're the right king. They're not the tyrant or the weakling. I'm betting on the immature form, says Sashi. Well, and I know I have been for a long time. My growth, my journey has been very much of a zigzag. There's been times when I got close, and then something would happen, and I would not overcome it. And that's not to lay the blame on society or circumstances. It's just I failed sometimes to overcome it. And that's one of the things I'm trying to do here is to basically, I'm out here thinking out loud, but I'm also hoping, as you guys are doing, that the community will sharpen my thoughts and help let me know when I'm maybe not necessarily on the right track. Lady V says there is no fail, only keep going. So, how did we get here? I'm going to now do the bass backward thing that I've been going to do before. We, in the West, we've pretty much lost our monarchies. I mean, yeah, we have some monarchs, but with the exception of Thailand, and Sashi says, do or do not, there is no try. Matt Cheatwood says, I think it's important to understand you only have control over yourself. If others obey you, it's because they chose to, and that is 100% correct. And when I talk about the divine kingship, and I say that I'm seeking it, I hope you all understand. I'm not looking for obedience. Um, I'm looking for trying to be more like what I ought to be. I want to be more like the kind of man that someone would want to follow. And if nobody follows, then that's fine, as long as everyone's following someone who's more worthy of following. But we've lost our heroes, we've lost our kings, and oh, and hello, JPRPH. It is good to see you. To be worthy of kingship, Matt Cheatwood says, even if you do not choose to live that life. Yeah, 100%. I don't know that I necessarily want to lead anybody going forward, but I want to be more like that person that people would be willing to trust. Uh, and I've learned that one of the things is before you can be a good leader, you often have to be a good follower. Matt, I know you've been in the military. You learned how to follow. You learned how to take orders, and now you're running your family, and basically you're taking care of them, and you're making sure that to the best of your ability, that if when crap hits the fan, they're taken care of. Yep, Lady of the Elements, good follower learns the best to lead. But even though we weren't a monarchy, America still had this mythos surrounding our leaders. We had George Washington, we had Abraham Lincoln. I know that not everybody loves those men, and that's okay. I'm not here to tell you to love them, but they were beloved at one time. Uh, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, there's a whole generation that just thought he was the stuff. And I know this generation, he's kind of fallen off of the throne a little bit, but he hasn't completely. Lady V Element says it's so hard to teach top students new formats. They're set in their ego and unwilling to bend at times. Yeah, 100%. Matt Cheatwood says he deeply respects Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson. Yeah, yeah. And my favorite presidents is evolving. I realized that when I made my latest one that Thomas Jefferson wasn't on there, and I kind of felt like a big dumbass because he absolutely should have been on there. And so, I'm going. Like I say, I'm reevaluating a lot of the things that I think, a lot of the things that I believe, and that's what you have here is me evaluating what I think in real time. Tired blogging. Something happened. Lady of the Elements. I respect Tesla more. He ran. He ran that without the yeah. I have a lot of respect for Tesla. There's I know that in the 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene, who is actually pretty sharp, he has a lot of shall we say critical things to say about this Tesla, but the man was brilliant, and I wonder often if we had followed that guideline instead of uh, Edison's, where we would be now. Many unnamed. There were others unnamed. Yeah, yeah. Often, this is one of the parts of Christian theology that I haven't given up. I think that whatever the final judgment is, whatever there is, God or gods, I think we're going to be shocked at who makes the cut. And if there is no God, well, we probably won't know. But I think that we would be shocked to know who the really great are and who is not. Tesla did not risk his life to acquire freedom for others, amazing as his accomplishments were. Not a bad point. If you tap into Tesla's wavelength, you'll be in a trance for weeks, which that actually sounds great, but then who would pay my bills? But it is a good point. something happened in the 60s. I don't want to get banned by YouTube, so I won't say much about what I think about these situations. But we had the assassination of Kennedy and Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King. And I think there was a very big symbolic loss of the kings in our society. We lost faith in our governments. The men that were killed, and of course, a lot of people may even rightfully say, for all I know, that these men were overrated, but in the hearts of Americans, these were the kings. Kennedy had Camelot. I mean, how much more king imagery do you want? And then what we had to replace that was Nixon and the media destroying Nixon. And I don't say that to defend him. I also don't say that to defend the media. We got a little bit closer with Reagan, arguably, but then there's also a lot of people. I have a lot of liberal friends who despise him. And sometimes it's hard to try to defend him when you do have the Iran-Contra, you have the closing of the banks in the early 80s. You have some definite mistakes. The Bushes, I can't hold them to be king-like. The Clintons, no, I hold them to be a mix of the weak and the tyrant. My apologies if there's anyone in here who likes the Clintons. Obama, I'm a little bit more neutral about, but at the same time, I feel like the last 20 years, we really haven't been governed by our presidents. I believe that the alphabet soup has been running things. And frankly, I think that they are probably to blame for some of those assassinations that I just discussed. Lady V says the idea of free energy rattled a lot of money cages, and that I believe to sadly be true. Matt Cheatwood, the modern American leftists are the opposite of liberals. Liberals seek liberty for themselves and others. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I became so attracted to the libertarian movement. I'm actually, I want to be a little bit careful here because the classical liberal, I'm not talking about the communist, I'm not talking about the socialist necessarily, but the classical liberal, yeah, I absolutely respect that. Seeking liberty for themselves and others totally is something I can get on board with. But it seems to me like the liberals and some of the conservatives are all too willing to tyrannize others. It's a soft tyranny. We make it look like we're good guys, but we're really living in a tyranny, in my humble opinion. Sashi, few people would have the wisdom to prefer criticism that would do them good to praise that deceives them. Yeah, yeah. I don't even know how that person's name is pronounced, but that's a great quote. And I don't know if I'm there yet, but that's what I've been striving to be. I don't. I hope I don't come across as weak when I listen to the criticisms of the people in the chat. That's what I'm trying to be, is someone that listens to the criticism and hopefully has some wisdom in applying it, what have you. Communism, socialism are both totalitarian governments. And in my humble opinion, I have friends who, if they show up, they may be upset to hear me say this, but I don't think that's wrong. I think that's true. So, but we've actually, even though we've been spending about 60 years in America losing our kings, the West has had a real love-hate relationship for over 2,000 years with kingship. And I don't want to get too pedantic, but I believe it helps us understand some of the dynamic of our own psyches. There's thousands of years, literally thousands of years of history behind our beliefs and our feelings about kings. Now, of course, as I've discussed, the ancients believed that the king was good. The king was aligned with the powers of nature and nature's God. But then what happens when they're not? And frankly, what happens when they're not, but they're also so strong that they become tyrants, and you have to find a way to deal with them beyond just simply not obeying and not giving the tax or the tribute. So there may be earlier elements, but to my knowledge, the earliest element of this is ancient Greece. And I'll just give a very short overview. How did we get democracy and republican government to begin with? And again, I'm not saying this to denigrate republican government. It's still the form that I believe to be best. But at the same time, there's a certain, frankly, kind of a damage to our psyches that we had to go to the extremes that we've gone to get the liberties that we had. I think I think at heart a lot of, maybe not us, but a lot of our ancestors would have far preferred to have just lived in peace under a righteous king, but they weren't allowed to. Uh, I did some digging into how the Greeks got their democracy, and I feel like my understanding is still fairly shallow, but I'm going to share what I have. Uh, History.com shares that in the late 6th century BC, the city state of Athens began to lay the foundations for a new kind of political system. This democratia, as it became known, was a direct democracy. It wasn't necessarily a republic, it was much closer to a direct democracy. And when you're wondering why Aristotle and even Plato, they did not like democracy. It's because they lived amongst it and they saw what could happen with it. Athens' Democratia, which lasted until 322 BC, is one of the earliest known examples of democracy. The last Tyrannos Testing, testing, testing. I think everyone was patient enough to wait, or many of you at least were patient to wait until I got my internet back up. I don't know what that was all about. Okay. Basically, I was talking about how Greece lost the respect of their kings and for their kings, and they decided to crown the people as the king. Thank you very much for waiting. I know it looks like there was some interesting discussion going on. I don't think that it was StreamYard deleted scenes. I think it was my actual internet or computer or something. But here we see Democratia, the goddess, crowning the people as the king. And so, I really love that image. I love the ideals of Republican slash quasi democratic government. But at the end of the day, when people learned how they could basically vote themselves bread in circuses, they lost the Peloponnesian War. They eventually lost their freedom to Alexander the Great and then to Rome. Now, uh, Rome had its own story for how they lost democracy or lost their kingdom. And I don't know how many people know that story. But essentially, the Romans had kings for several centuries. And then a time came when their kings just became too much to take. And you may be familiar with this name. If you're a fan of Star Wars, you remember the Grand Moff Tarkin. Well, yeah, Lucas, he took that name from history, but at least he stole up. Tarkin was traditionally the seventh and last king of Rome, accepted by some as a historical figure. His reign dated from 534 to 509 BC. Tarquinius Superbus, that's a hell of a name. I tell you what, I may just put that on my gravestone. Tarquinius Superbus was in Roman tradition the son of Tarquinius Priscus. Anyway, supposedly he murdered Tullius and established an absolute despotism, hence his name Superbus, meaning the proud. In the reign of terror that followed, many senators were put to death. Eventually, a group of senators led by Lucius Junius Brutus raised a revolt, the immediate cause of which was the rape of a noblewoman, Lucretia, by Tarquinius' son Sextus. The Romans put up with a lot of crap from the Tarquin, but they weren't going to, they weren't going to let his son just rape women with impunity. The Tarquin family was expelled from Rome. The monarchy at Rome was abolished. Tarquin was said to have provoked a series of attacks on Rome by its neighbors, and I won't go too much deeper into that. But essentially, for the next 400 or 500 years, kingship was anathema to the people of Rome. When Julius Caesar was attempting to become an emperor, he was basically trying to reestablish the kingdom. And even though the people loved Caesar and he did have certain elements of kingship, they had been so psychologically scarred and damaged by the Tarquin family that even 400 years later, they wanted nothing to do with it. They had to have an enormous civil war. They had to have essentially the murder of Caesar, and then a civil war that killed Brutus and Cassius, and then another civil war that established the dominance of Augustus Caesar before they would finally become an empire and basically a sort of a monarchy going forward. Sashi says that Singapore just jailed a woman for 5 days and suspended her license for 2 years by speeding by accessing a car's GPS data. Oh my God. I don't even know what to say to that. And I have had that thought in my mind before. What are we going to do when the police start having I'm sure they have the capacity anyway. Or maybe I shouldn't say I'm sure, but I wouldn't doubt they have the capacity. But what are we going to do when all they have to do is log into our computer and see all the things that we've done? And then freedom is basically gone. That Fourth Amendment. So there are deep-seated reasons why we don't want kings in the Western society. Now, obviously, Rome had an empire, and then the empire fell, and we had hundreds of years of European kings. We had the divine right of the Christian king. And in many ways, that was actually kind of worse. Now, at the risk of YouTube nailing me, I wanted to go through a YouTube video that explains how the British kings lost their power. Because, as I say, all this goes back even before the American Revolution. The Revolution was just basically the final straw, at least for America. And let's see if YouTube will be kind and let me share when Britain lost their kings. And I will stop every minute or so and give some commentary.
Let's think of the UK. Certainly, the centerpiece in your tapestry of admirable thoughts is going to be the king or queen, roughly 10% of the time. Yet, while the United Kingdom remains a kingdom even to this day, the position of monarch has become essentially ceremonial, with real power firmly in the grasp of Parliament. But when did this transition happen? And how did the kings let Parliament get away with it? Well, this struggle for power has been going on for quite some time, way before the United Kingdom became united. I'm not really sure it's united now. So sorry about that. We need to go all the way back to the 13th century. England was its own thing back then, and like most medieval kingdoms at the time, it was in a constant power struggle between the king and his vassals. Unsurprisingly, this parliamentarian mess was started by King John, famous for, among other things, almost selling England out to Islam.
I don't know a thing about that last part. I need to look into it. Yes, Sashi, go get those groceries. And Poon's Cat, all that you've really missed is I'm basically talking about how the archetype of the king is important to us psychologically, but yet the West has lost their kings, and why that's basically in a lot of ways a good thing. There's reasons why we overthrew our kings, but at the same time, there's something that's psychologically lost when we get rid of our ideas about kings. The one thing I wanted to comment, hopefully I'm still on here. Let me know if you guys can't hear. Well, if you can't hear me, you can't hear me. But let me know if you can hear me. Matt Chewood says, my position on this is that every man should be king of himself. And that's what I agree with, too. They don't talk much about it in this video. I kind of wish they would. But King John was the one who basically betrayed Richard the Lionhearted. And, of course, that caused all the Robin Hood stories. Okay, and thank you for letting me know that. And essentially, we had this wicked king that history just really doesn't like, and I haven't heard many good things said about uh, King John, but he is the guy who got us the Magna Carta. And of course, he was forced to do that because he was a dink.
When his barons rebelled and got him to sign the Magna Carta in 1215, they demanded permanent representation in a great council, which had the right to reject any new taxes proposed by the king. Now, John tried to backtrack and wage war on the barons, but he died just a year later, and his 9-year-old son, Henry III, well, he had little choice in the matter. So, pretty much since the 13th century, the kings of England had to go through this great council to raise any meaningful amounts of money. The first time the council was referred to as Parliament was in 1236, when the now grown-up Henry tried to fund his wedding to Eleanor of Provence, who was just 12 years old at the time. But that's a minor detail. Now, this original parliament only got together at the request of the king, and its members were either feudal or ecclesiastical lords. However, Henry soon realized that these weren't the only people with money in England. Some among the merchants and the knights could be equally, if not more, rich.
So basically, the kings just couldn't raise enough money. We weren't willing to be taxed. And I say we because, I assume that my ancestors were either not nobles or not very high up in the scale if they were. But essentially, people weren't willing to just pay for everything willy-nilly. And so he had to have a parliament in order to raise money to do all of his spiffy wars and spiffy marriages and all those Joffrey kind of things that kings do.
Henry started inviting such commoners in 1254, which obviously wasn't taken too well by the barons. They rose up in rebellion not long after, and, like with King John, they eventually sat Henry down and had him sign the Provisions of Oxford. The commoners could stay, but the king's advisors would be elected by the barons. And, crucially, Parliament would now meet 3 times per year, rather than only when the king felt like it. Over the next century, as the kings of England duked it out with France during the 100 Years' War, they had to earn Parliament's favour to secure funds for their campaigns. The barons were happy just to be left to their own devices, like abusing their serfs. But the commoners actually wanted to see, change. As an act of protest in 1341, the commoners assembled in a separate building from the barons, and that's how the House of Commons was born.
So probably, let's see here. There are more people showing up here. And I can't remember if I said hello or not to Putin's cat. I responded to his chat, but I don't know if I actually said hi. Hello. He is indeed the master of his domain, and I don't know that I'm the master of mine, but the only one that I really have to vie with is Cassie, mostly. So, and meow meow, Moira Kitty, it is good to see you. Matt Cheatwood says, master is not necessarily the same as kingship, according to the definition of kingship we are working with here. That is true. So, unless everyone is bored with this, I will continue with explaining how Britain, they may not have lost their kings, but their history actually does have a deep-rooted space in how we have lost the kingdom, how we've lost kings in our psychology.
The commons were demanding rights like veto power over royal expenditures, the ability to draft new laws, and, dare I say it, fair taxation. In 1397, King Richard II decided to punish these treasonous demands and tried to rein Parliament in, which, as always, backfired spectacularly.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
This time around, Parliament had the king deposed and gave the crown to his cousin. Then, for the next 200 years, the powers of Parliament were respected, more or less, until we get to Charles I. He too tried to raise taxes without consent, and after a brief...
So, y'all remember taxation was a big deal. It wasn't the only big deal, but it was one of the big deals in the American Revolution. And now, to quote the song, the dollar ain't shit and it's taxed to no end.
Civil War, as you do, Parliament put him on trial for treason. The king argued that he couldn't commit treason against himself. He was the king, after all. And that's when Parliament got the brilliant idea of separating the idea of king and country. Charles I was judged a traitor not to himself.
So, interrupting here, all through the centuries, we still kept that idea that the king is the land, and the wounded fisher king is what is causing the famine and all that stuff. Well, it took a friggin' act of Parliament for us to get rid of that mythological idea, and I suspect it's still deeply rooted somewhere down in our monkey brains. But Charles could be, according to Parliament, judged a traitor because the king is not the land, and he can betray the kingdom. It was quite an interesting and frankly a dark time. Well, no matter which side of the revolution you were on, people forget England had its revolution too, and it was pretty horrible. And a lot of the things that they're about to discuss were not too far back from living memory at the time when we had our revolution.
But to England, and he was executed. Ooh.
Graphic, huh?
Unfortunately, Charles's son, James II, had similar ideas about his divine right to rule. Though for him, Parliament figured out an extra spicy solution. They collaborated with his daughter Mary and her husband William, the leader of the Dutch Republic, to organize a massive invasion of England, the last such invasion to be successful. Parliament deposed James and gave the crown to William and Mary simultaneously in exchange for signing the Bill of Rights, which conclusively established Parliament's power over the king.
Now, I think it's interesting. I haven't read the British Bill of Rights, but I suspect it's not too dissimilar from our own. And from what I hear, the English people really don't seem to have a lot of rights going on right now. Putin's cat says the king does own all the land. He gave out pieces to lords that did his will. This is why I could care less. They don't pay taxes. Yeah, fair point there.
Eventually, the English Parliament voted to merge with the Scottish one, forming the Kingdom of Great Britain. And then, 100 years later, they also added Ireland into the mix to form the United Kingdom we all know and love. Now, while the days of absolute royal power are gone, you can still relive them thanks to our dear friends over at Kingdom Maker.
Okay, and that's enough of that. That's the sponsor that he has there, and that's all well and good. But yeah, essentially, even before the American Revolution, our forefathers were steeped in this idea that it wasn't necessarily that kings were altogether bad or that we should absolutely get rid of them, but it was very integral to our philosophy and even to the British philosophy that the king did not have absolute power. The king had power that was curtailed by the consent of the governed. And yes, Putin's cat, you are not wrong. The kings often did terrorize the world. And so, at the risk of sounding wishy-washy, why am I talking about how it's so terrible that we've lost the kings. Because if you've noticed, I'm on the side of all the democratic movements here. I'm on the side of the ancient Athenians. I'm on the side of the ancient Romans. I'm on the side of the common Britain. But yet, somehow, we miss the king. Well, what's up with that? Matt Cheatwood, good kings are useful, bad kings are destructive. And yes, Putin's cat. I think we understood that. And in most cases, the British kings, at least I would say before 1800, were, and really even going forward from there. But they could be pretty savage. And I have liberal friends who have actually told me that the speech that Patrick Henry's "Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death" speech was a dangerous thing, that it incited bad violence, and that it took us years to get over that kind of thing. And I I don't know what to do with that, because honestly, that Patrick Henry speech has always been kind of a central crux of my political beliefs. Now, honestly, yeah, my political beliefs could be a bunch of crap, but then that philosophy did build, I don't mean to be jingoistic, but I think we built one of the greatest things that's ever been. And now we seem to be just trying to piss it all away. So please don't think that when I'm saying all this that we should go back to being a monarchy, although I'm willing to listen to someone who has an intelligent and cogent argument about monarchy. We are not over that thing. Don't tread on me. See, I, you know, I'm more on your side than the that other side, because I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to convince me that we were wrong to have the revolution, then we should just call this whole thing and go back to being under the Brits and God save King Charles, and let them be the mightiest thing in the world. But in my heart, I don't believe that. I love a lot of British things. I'm a Britophobe, or whatever the term would be. And in fact, I'm about to quote a British man. Um, because, like I say, there's something wounded and even kind of broken in our hearts. And while I want to continue as a republic, I also want to continue as a psychologically healthy republic. And I hope that I'm at least on the trail of something like that. One of my favorite authors, and yes, Putin's cat. I'll have to click on this before I can click on your chat. Crap. Okay, I thought I was going to lose you again. British, they really kind of did. They lost most of their empire during World War II. They nominally have the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, but yeah, for all intents and purposes, their empire fell at the end of World War II. C.S. Lewis, monarchy can easily be debunked, but watch the faces, mark well the accents of the debunkers. And I don't count anyone in the chat here, but I know some of the kinds of people he's talking about. These are the men whose taproot in Eden has been cut, who no rumor of the polyphony, the dance, can reach. Men to whom pebbles laid in a row are more beautiful than an arch. Yet even if they desire mere equality, they cannot reach it. Where men are forbidden to honor a king, they honor millionaires, athletes, or film stars instead, even famous prostitutes or gangsters. For spiritual nature, like bodily nature, will be served. Deny it food, and it will gobble poison. Well, I read this about 25 years ago, and actually, he did more toward shaking up my worldview than my friend did. Again, I'm not going so far as to suggest that we go back to monarchy. It's true, it's easily debunked, but it's also true that it seems to leave a hole in our hearts. Uh, some people fill that with Christianity. Some people fill that with their religion or their philosophy. Some people fill it with, really loving some movie star or or as he said, even gangsters. You know, uh, we raise up gangster rappers or mafioso or uh, Trumps or Bidens or Obamas or Trump or Bushes or Reagans. We have a need in our heart for that, and I think that we have to acknowledge that. We have to embrace the shadow of that, and we have to learn how to temper that in a healthy way. Matt Cheatwood, it is an important distinction that ancient kings were chosen, elected. Yeah, they were. They were elected by the chiefs and the people. And then, we got this whole idea that, you know, we're going to inherit it all. 30 minutes to go. I'm going to try to get through at least one more thing. Somebody has a blog post that I wanted to share some of their takes. No, that's not what I want. I want to present. I want to share the screen. This is the blog, Anne Maria Clark, Tales of Wonder, Ancient Wisdom from Myth, Legend, and Fairy Tale. Hold the Light. She has this painting of the quest and attainment of the Holy Grail. She also was looking at king, warrior, magician, lover, rediscovering the archetypes of the mature masculine. She also shows the triangle of the king, the tyrant, and the weakling. The king in his fullness incorporates all four archetypes in their major expression. He is king, but also magician, warrior, and lover. Aragorn in Lord of the Rings is the embodiment of this fullness, as is clear to see. That being said, there is no such thing as a wholly sorted king. Even the best are only human and subject to human frailty. Myth, legend, and fairy tale show us all these aspects writ large. There is a very ancient idea of the health of the king touched upon earlier, that the land and the king are one. Our notions of sovereignty in a deeply spiritual sense are rooted in such ideas. When the king is healthy and fertile, so is the land. When he is sick, the same holds true. He is a personification of the values and the dominant principles within the collective as a whole. Matt Cheatwood, yep, modern day presidents are very similar. One of the reasons why, and with respect to anyone who's going to vote for Biden, I am not going to vote for Biden. I don't think he's healthy enough to run our country. And I realize that there are people who disagree with me, and they may be right, I may be wrong. But possibly maybe this is just me psychologically reacting back to the time when the health of the king was the health of the land. Putin's cat. What does it say about him having sex with half sisters? Yeah, there was plenty of that went on back in the day. Neither choices are healthy. For the kingdom to flourish and thrive, he must create and maintain order, dispense blessings, and be fertile, ensuring the continuation of his line. He must know and protect his boundaries, be fair in judgment, and support his people through continual acknowledgement of their talents and contribution to the whole. In this way, he will create a stable and healthy community within which all souls feel valued. Crucially, he must possess humility. Um, is there anybody running for any office right now who's showing humility? Is there anyone that is being fair in their judgment and support of their people? Are we protecting our borders? Just putting that out there. Again, I'm not saying don't vote, vote however you want, but when you vote, ask that question. I don't know that voting is even the answer anymore. I don't even know I'm going to vote. But I think that these are questions that citizens need to be asking. He holds audience primarily not to be seen, but to see, admire, and delight in his subjects, to reward them and to bestow honors upon them. He must be able to put himself to the side to act for the collective good, always remembering the temporary nature of his position and the transitory nature of the rank he serves, as is most beautifully expressed in The Lion King. Although, there again, we have someone having sex with, oh yeah, that's right, and you told me about that, Brandon Herrera, and I do need to look into him. My bad. Thing is, our borders are not like borders in South America or Asia. We need to be smart, 100%. 100%. We need to be smart about who we let in. But Canada nor Mexico, yeah, and I'm not afraid necessarily of an invasion. It's not that scares me. Maybe it should, but it's not that scares me. It's just the thought that who knows what terrorists we're letting in? Who knows what 9/11 is going to happen next? The wounded king, the shadow king. When these values are not embodied, the king may slip into the grip of the archetype shadows, the extreme of this manifesting as the tyrant, or he may become weak, as we see in Tolkien's King of Rohan, who falls tragically under the spell of an evil trickster. Then the kingdom will fall to ruin. In the figure of Theoden, Rohan's king, we see a once fine man fallen prey to the poisonous and disempowering counsel of his advisor, transparently nicknamed Wormtongue, whilst in the character of the Denethor, steward of Gondor, we see a man seduced by his own grandiosity and sense of entitlement, a king who has lost touch with his people, with the heart and soul of the kingdom he serves, and whilst he pursues his own interest, he loses his moral compass. Evil penetrates his borders, and the people are unprotected. In the end, both kings die. But unlike the king of Rohan, who is spectacularly released from his enchantment by Gandalf and given the opportunity to redeem himself in one final battle, Denethor the steward is driven by his madness to take his own life. And I much prefer how he took his life in the book than in the movie, but there it goes. These two kings, one fallen, one corrupted, are worthy of a study in their own right, perfectly exemplify Moore and Gillette's bipolar end of the king archetype pyramid. Tolkien's work is a tour de force of the masculine psyche. European fairy tales and medieval legend too abound with examples of all three archetypal expressions of the king and his shadow. Let's see what the chat says. I really don't like when my computer does that. Matt Cheatwood, this is not an invasion. This is an infiltration. I would agree with that. Putin's cat, I will say without proof, if people from China are flying to Mexico to enter the U.S., they should be sent away. And yeah, Putin's cat, each region of the world should be required to enter specific ports. Yeah. China would have to enter San Francisco or Seattle. I'm talking asylum, not proper visas. Yeah, no, that all of that actually makes sense to me. The king in Sleeping Beauty, for instance, is clearly the cause of all the troubles in his domain. Believing himself above the law, he blatantly ignores protocol and does not invite the 13th fairy to his daughter's christening party, reflecting his disregard for what she represents. When the tale begins, the king and queen are longing for a child, but after 7 years of marriage, there is no sign. This reflects a generalized lack of fertility within the kingdom, a state of stuckness. The old values are maintained, clung to even, and renewal prevented. It takes a slimy green frog to emerge from the depths to nudge things in the right direction. He is clearly a messenger from the unconscious, from the soul, if you like, a voice that only the queen can hear, and sufficiently potent for her to take matters into her own hands. It seems superficially in many renderings of the tale that the lack is with this queen, yet the picture as a whole suggests otherwise. After the birth of the princess, the king continues as before, recklessly ignoring the words of the 13th fairy, who has arrived unbidden and placed a curse on his beloved child. She will prick her finger on a spindle on her 15th birthday, as well we all know. But the king is all done with fairies and wishes and curses, not believing in this superstitious nonsense, has all the spindles destroyed, job done, as they say, or so he naively believes, but fate will have its way, as we know, resulting in the entire palace with his beautiful daughter at its heart being plunged into darkness, into sleep and deep unconsciousness for 100 years. Matt Cheatwood says they're flying into Ecuador, not Mexico. Third-party country crap needs to stop. China should be more restricted than Central America from the get-go. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Matt Cheatwood said they had money for flights to Central America, then walked the southern border. Yeah, I'm not going to get into that here, but isn't it interesting that people have money to fly to Central America? People have money to cross a continent and get across our border. I would suggest that that needs to be looked into, but I'm not going to look into it here at the moment anyway. The Wounded King at the heart of the Grail quest. In the quest for the Holy Grail, a similar theme is present. We're told at the start, the land is dried up and turned to waste. The mysterious castle of the rich fisherman, the Fisher King, has vanished, and paths to the courts of joy are lost beyond recall. In Camelot, the wizard Merlin cries out that a king lies terribly wounded at the heart of that place and will never be cured until a knight, foremost amongst those seated at the round table, has done mighty deeds of alms, of bounty, and of nobility. And only when he is asked what one does and whom one serves with the Grail will the king be cured and the enchantments fall which are at present in the land of Britain. Many of the brave knights who took up willingly this most high and holy challenge, 3 alone were destined to succeed. These were Sir Galahad, Sir Bors, and Sir Percival, the perfect fool, whose story we take up briefly. The story tells that it was to him that a pathway to the lost castle was first revealed. Soon after, he arrived at a small chapel within where the wounded king cried out in his torment. And there he witnessed a mysterious procession during which a bleeding spear and a carved stone dish were carried through the interior of that place, led by a damsel of pure and matchless beauty who bore the Holy Grail itself, veiled beneath a cloth of silk. And the light that shone forth from that vessel was so bright that even the stars in the night sky were put out by it. Sir Percival remained silent. Straightway the castle and all its inhabitants vanished. The young knight found himself all alone, once more in the desolate forest. Very soon after, the beautiful damsel who had borne the Holy Grail appeared to him. Though her countenance and her form were much changed, and it seemed to her hero that all the weight of time had come suddenly upon her, she rebuked him, saying that his failure to ask the essential question had much prolonged the agony of the wounded king, who could now neither die nor find relief in his torment. Nor can the wasteland or her own lost beauty ever be restored until that question is finally asked. But what is the question that will release the king from his torment? What is the nature of the terrible wound that afflicts him, and how has it come about? His health is paramount, as we have seen, reflecting the vitality of the entire kingdom. In several versions of the legend, we are introduced to him as the rich fisherman, a sad, wounded figure hunched over his rod in the vain hope of catching a fish from the stagnant waters that surround him. The legend tells of a moral failure, a disregarding of the voices of the wells. Hopefully YouTube doesn't cut me down, but of a raping of the muses, who served the draught of inspiration from holy whales and anointed kings of the realm. This king, however, has gone it alone, so to speak, without reference or acknowledgement of the greater mysteries of life, like all the corrupted and fallen kings we have seen. Like them, he is split off from the deep feminine aspects of the psyche. And one of the things I do want to say, I should have said it by now. When I say that we need to recover the masculine, I don't mean that we should denigrate the feminine, or that we should cast out the feminine, or that we shouldn't recognize that there is a certain amount of femininity in ourselves. To me, that is the king becoming a tyrant, and that's not a good thing at all either. The consequence for the Grail King is the chronic genital wound he suffers and the infertility that has followed. He is stagnated like the pools in which he fishes in vain, doomed in his agony to repeat the same old ritual every night of being carried to the hall where the Grail is present, but never ever being able to partake of its mystery and its healing. As individuals, too, we can all from time to time become like the Fisher King. I don't know if anyone's seen that movie, but that was a great movie with Robert Williams as the broken-minded man who finds part of his healing in the myth. When our zest for life is lost, when we lose connection with our own internal sacred space and its regenerative force, then we no longer care for our own internal kingdom, for our own bodies even. Our worlds become flat and colorless. We've lost the paths to own courts of joy, our own soul's replenishment. Until, of course, in fairy tale speak, a young knight of great destiny, that part of ourselves, arrives to ask the pivotal question, the question that will turn it all around. But he is young, he is naive, overawed by the moment, inexperienced when he first arrives, as we have seen. He has not long left home. He still wears homespun vest. His failure at the Grail Castle reflects all these things. He was simply not ready. 7 years thereafter, Sir Percival wandered the forest. Trial and tribulation met him at every turn. All his good intentions were tested to the hilt, and otherworldly adventures too numerous to mention. When the 7 years were past and gone, there dawned a wisdom in his heart. He was enabled to arrive at the dwelling of a hermit who presented him with a golden key. There's that key again. A silken cloak. In this case, gotten by the hermit. In the other fairy tale, it's under the pillow of the queen. A silken cloak embroidered with the image of a golden dove, and directs him to the mysterious castle, which surprisingly was very close by. No one knows exactly how he proceeded from that place. Others proclaim that magically the great golden wings upon his cloak quickened and stirred to life. He was at once borne upward and onward to the castle of the Grail. All there feasted together as one company. Each one had a tale of wonder to impart. Then the young Sir Percival, with the knights of his own time, was led to the small chapel within, for still the wounded king cried out in his torment, and he witnessed again the magnificent possession of the Holy Grail, the mysterious bleeding spear and carved stone dish. And when at last he asked what one does and whom one serves with the Grail, it was immediately given into his hands, and he understood that he must offer it to the wounded and long-suffering king. And as he placed the holy vessel to the parched lips of that man, he was at once completely healed and the wasteland burst forth into a glorious flowering of spring. Legend tells that thereafterwards, the 3 knights of the Grail were spirited away on the ship of Solomon to the high city of Saraz, where a final mass of the quest was celebrated amidst a great company of angels. So, my knights and my servants and my true children, who are come out of mortal life into spiritual life, I will no longer hide from you. This is the angel of the Grail. You shall see a part of my secrets and my hidden things. Now behold and receive the high meat you have so long desired. The notion of the periodic renewal of the king is deeply enshrined in myth, for good reason. By such means, the health, fertility, good governance of the kingdom is assured. Like the prince who will eventually arrive to awaken the sleeping beauty, Sir Percival is destined from the start to effect the great transformation and become the new king himself. His success signals a new beginning. Spring has come again. So I don't know, maybe I'm just rambling, but my point here is somehow we need a renewal. We need, for those who believe in spirituality, we need a spiritual renewal. For you who don't, we need some kind of perhaps an intellectual reawakening of what we are, what we believe, what we're here to do. What are the right questions to ask? And how do we renew the king in our hearts? I'm down to the last 10 minutes. I'm mostly through all the material that I wanted to go through, but I'm also dreadfully tired. I feel the pain of the Fisher King right now. Matt Cheatwood says that I agree at Putin's cap. The illegal aliens are not coming through the ports of entry. They're just walking in. Putin's cat says, country of origin, China, passport coming through the West Coast. Yeah, I agree. That's weird. Why is that happening? And there are reasons. Were they persecuted in China and then in Ecuador? I mean, what is the asylum justification? Matt Cheatwood, I think this is a very poetic statement of the idea. Those who are given power must be people who want to serve, not just those who desire power over others. And I absolutely agree. And it is my firm belief that on both sides of the aisle, and again, Matt has brought up, forgive my chronic fatigue, I've forgotten his name already. Brandon Herrera, I need to just put that into my search. He is a polls have closed. Now that polls have closed, before results come in, where Tony Gonzalez barely won the runoff. Ugh. What does that say about our country? Well, I will not. I have it up and I will look it up, but I'm not going to talk much more about it here. He is running for office in Texas. Yes, and at least according to the Texas Tribune, Tony Gonzalez declares victory in the GOP runoff. That was 5 days ago, I guess. So I'm always like that, $1 a day late and $1 short. Is Brandon Herrera in Congress? He ran for election and lost in the Republican primary runoff. I believe that I'm going to learn to my regret that's probably a bad loss. He's a YouTuber. Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, no, it says that. Let's look at his overview. If it'll open. I don't know if it'll open. Okay, this is his Reddit page. That's really not very useful to any of us. Brendan Herrera. Balladopedia. Let's look at him there. And I will stop sharing that, and I will present that. And I think that will be that in a few ending statements will be the ending. The fact that it was so close is encouraging. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I need to be more of a glasses half full kind of guy. Brandon Herrera ran for election in the U.S. House to represent Texas' 23rd Congressional District. Handsome looking guy there. He attended Campbell College. He studied pre-law before leaving to start a firearms manufacturing business. As of the 2024 election, Herrera was the host of a YouTube channel focused on firearms-related content with more than 3 million subscribers. And I got to say, I know just from the tiny bit of suppression that I get, he had to fight pretty hard to get that level of success on YouTube. YouTube does not like guns. Why did it do that? Balladopedia identified the May 28 Republican primary runoff for Texas' 23rd Congressional District as a battleground race. The summary below is from our coverage of this election. Incumbent Tony Gonzalez won the runoff, received 50.7% to Herrera's 49.3%. Yeah, that is a good tight race. Maybe people are starting to wake up a little bit. They're the two finishers of the two candidate primary. Don't really care about Gonzalez. Herrera was a firearms manufacturer. He said he was running because Gonzalez had not lived up to his supporters' values during his time in office. Herrera said the district's voters were done with Tony Gonzalez and his betrayal of our shared conservative values. Referring to Gonzalez votes on border security, vaccine requirements, and firearms regulations. Yeah, my hat's definitely off to him for being a successful YouTuber with beliefs like that. That's incredible. I need to be watching him if only to learn those kinds of things. Well, I'm going to call it a stream. I thank you all for listening. I hope that you learned a little bit or were hopefully mildly entertained, at least in some parts of it. I don't know if it's going to go all the way back, but I would like to thank Matt Cheatwood. He was here from the very beginning. I'd like to thank Dadman Walken, Lady of the Elements, Deleted Scenes, Sashi, the man from the future whose king we shall not criticize for his sake. JPRPH, thank you very much. You're always so supportive, and you're always letting me know about Ren videos that I've somehow missed. And of course, Putin's cat and Moira. Putin keeps us on our toes. Putin does too, I'm sure, but Putin's cat keeps us on our toes, and Moira keeps us informed. And I kind of wish she had been governor, but it is what it is. Thank you very much. I hope it was a good stream. I'm going to call it now. I still haven't come up with a good moniker for an ending, but I have learned how to play the music. So let's end with this one. Maybe. No, actually, let's end with this one. I know everybody uses it, but I think it's appropriate for the end of the stream. So the long and the short, we've lost our kings, for good or ill. And therefore, we need to find the king in our own heart. We need to be our own kings. And if we surrender our kingship to other people, then it is quite possible that we deserve the things that we get. The debate between Putin's cat and Matt Cheatwood demonstrates that we are all aware of these problems, and that too many people have surrendered their kingship to people who are cruel or careless, who don't care about us. They don't care about the people crossing the border, that they're not caring about them either. And in the end, I don't know if voting is going to be the answer, but I know that in some way the answer is going to be found by us being good kings and queens of our own lives and our own families. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for the support. And I'm hoping that Thade will be better. I'm hoping that on Saturday, 8 or 9:30, we will be talking about ancient civilizations. If he's not able to make it, I'll probably pick a time sometime Saturday and continue to talk about themes that I'm learning from Iron John and the way to recover our manhood. Eventually, I may talk about the other archetypes as well. I believe the next archetype I'm going to talk about is going to be the lover. So, let's see if I can pull that off. And where we're headed to, Putin's cat, I don't know. I would love to present hope, as Matt Cheatwood says. Hope that somehow we find a way to overcome these challenges, find a way to renew self-government, to get rid of this corrupt hegemony. Oh, which stream? I think Deleted Scenes has a stream that he's going on. Let me take a look before I end this and see what all is up. Dad Man Walking. That's where I think I'm going to send everybody. I'm going to send a link here, and anyone that isn't too tired, I'll probably just go in to say hi and bye. But anyone who isn't too tired, please go and see Dad Man Walking and show him some love. Send a Curtis Ray down there, and then Mark C with the Kojak. I don't know that I know that one. Okay. Mark C with the Kojak. I want to look that up because I'll send people there as well. Maybe. I'm smart enough to get it to pop up. I don't think I am. I don't think I'm following Mark C with the Kojak. But Putin's cat recommends him, so if anyone else subscribes to them or is smart enough to actually go there, by all means. I'm going to say hello to Dad Man Walking and probably be in there for a few minutes, and then I'm going to bed. Thank you very much for watching, and from one king to a group of kings and queens, have a wonderful night. Dream kingly thoughts.